Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. This week we're going to be talking about skills, strategies, and orthographic development. Before I read the articles, I thought that skills are what one does naturally, while strategies filled in the gaps between those natural abilities. In the article, clarifying differences between reading skills and reading strategies, it was summed up on page 368. That reading strategies are deliberate, goal-directed attempts to control and modify the reader's efforts to decode text, understand words, and construct meanings of text. While reading skills are automatic actions that result in decoding and comprehension with speed, efficiency, and fluency, and usually occur without awareness of the components or control involved. This confirmed my original thoughts before reading, but just stated it in a much better way than I ever could. So we know that skills are automatic actions that result in decoding and comprehension, and it happens without readers' conscious awareness. The strategies, on the other hand, are deliberate, goal-directed attempts to decode and comprehend text. The readers monitor their effectiveness and revise them as necessary. When you're struggling to differentiate between the two, ask yourself, is it an automatic action or is it deliberately controlled by the student? Even though we aim to differentiate between strategies and skills, it doesn't mean these are stagnant in students. Ideally, strategies will turn into skills, so they'll be changing. This does take continual, repeated practice over time. Our hope as teachers is to see a struggling student notice a need to monitor their comprehension as they are reading. They would then deliberately self-question and monitor their own understanding, rereading as necessary. So they could ask themselves, does this make sense after every sentence? And go back as needed. Over time, they become more comfortable with the strategy and it becomes automatic. When the student can use the strategy quickly and efficiently with little to no conscious awareness, it can then be considered a skill. At this time, the teacher should introduce the student to a new, challenging strategy or text so they don't get bored or remain stationary in their reading abilities. So now that we know the differences between skills and strategies, and that strategies can become skills, what are we hoping to do with this information? Well, throughout your teaching, you need to identify that automatic processes are skills, and deliberately controlled processes are strategies. Our goals in the classroom should be to design instruction that gives strategies clear steps for the students. Provide practice so strategies become skills, and then push the students so they are motivated to overcome challenges. And this leads me to my first question. What strategy could your past, current, or future students most benefit from, and how will you ensure the strategy becomes a skill? Our second article, Start Comprehending, Students and Teachers Actively Reading Text, discussed 8 comprehension skills and a framework that all students can benefit from. This includes below level, on level, and above level students. These strategies can be used with fiction or nonfiction texts and must be used with self-selected texts. The self-selected texts ensure students are engaged and motivated by what they are reading and will likely use the comprehension strategies more effectively. These are the 8 comprehension strategies that should be directly taught, practiced, and applied independently. The first column shows when the strategy should be happening during reading. The second column shows the 8 strategies. And the last column shows sentence stems that students can use when they are saying or writing their thoughts about the strategies. So what does the START framework look like in the classroom? The teacher first gives explicit instruction of each strategy. They can model by thinking aloud with the whole group. The teacher will then scaffold the strategy into all of the following read-alouds, so they build upon each other. Students then apply it during independent reading time, and they must use the Art of Comprehension recording sheets to be effective, because the research showed overwhelmingly that completing the 3 parts without the comprehension recording sheet was not beneficial. So teachers who modeled with think-alouds, scaffolded the strategy in all following read-alouds, and gave students independent reading time without the comprehension recording sheet did not see the benefits. So the art of comprehension recording sheet is a definite must. Here's a picture of the instructional sequence for the START framework. I know it's a bit small, but you can refer to yours on page 26 of the article if you need to. This chart helped me understand how I'm supposed to implement this in my classroom. I think of the strategies as building blocks. You put up the first building block with structural supports. That sets overnight before introducing or adding another building block. That's when you remove the structural supports from the first block and move them to the second. This continues until all 8 strategies have been introduced, but you have to monitor that each building block is still standing the next day, or else the whole building will collapse. I personally have a couple concerns with this framework. My first is, how am I going to fit 8 strategies into 1 mini lesson each day without losing the student's attention completely? And my second is, there's supposed to be 40 sessions solely committed to these comprehension strategies. I don't believe I have that kind of time in my classroom, but who knows, maybe it will work once I try it. The author points out on page 30 that teachers using the START framework maximize the effectiveness of instruction that was already occurring during the school day and did not add more planning time or take away from other valuable instructional time. So I'd love to hear what you think about fitting this framework into your instructional day and the discussions this week. Will it fit? Will it not fit? What are your thoughts? In Chapter 2 of Words Their Way, we learned about assessing orthographic development. There's a synchrony of literacy development, meaning there's a natural progression students go through in their literacy development. Spelling inventories are meant to assess students' progress through the progression. They should be given in relaxed atmospheres to avoid copying because there's less pressure that way. If you feel the need to put up what I call casitas or blockers, you can definitely do that so that way you don't have the copying issue. You get to decide as the teacher whether you're going to give it whole group or small group because it depends on your students and their needs. But no matter what, before beginning, you should tell students that the words will get harder and that they will struggle. Just do their best. I like to tell my kids in situations like this with benchmarks or what have you, just do your best and forget the rest, and they relax a lot. While you're giving the spelling inventory, you need to circulate the room to monitor student progress, much like you would giving a regular old spelling test. You should pronounce the word naturally without hints or chunking of the words. You should say the word twice, and you can use it in a sentence. But you should only use it in a sentence if it's absolutely necessary to differentiate between what words you're using. If it's a homonym, or a homophone, or if it sounds like another word. And then you need to know when to stop. You can monitor your students so you can see if they're becoming frustrated or if they've given up altogether. You know them best, so use your judgment. There are 2 different scores you can get from the spelling inventories. You can get the raw power score, which gives you a general spelling stage for the students, or you can use the feature guides to break it down more specifically to confirm the spelling stage from the raw power score. There are a few confusions in scoring that happen. The first is static reversals. That's when students write B written backward as D. This usually happens in the younger students. You need to notate that mistake, but do not count it as wrong. Kinetic reversals is when they get all of the sounds of the consonant and vowels, but just have them out of order. So you need to give credit for correct consonants and vowels, but no bonus point for correct spelling. And extra letters, such as putting an E on the end of train. Give credit for what was represented correctly, but no bonus points for correct spelling. When you are grouping students for instruction after giving the inventories, you're going to begin instruction with students where students make 2 or less errors. So when you're in doubt, put students in lower groups. This is also the case if you have a wide range of abilities and you're struggling to make groups. Bump them down rather than up. because it's easier to move students forward in groups than to go backwards. You can also consider other classroom observations when deciding on groups. Look at their spelling and their unedited writing. That'll give you lots of information. And then, as always, consider the behavior dynamics between peers. Groups should be fluid and constantly changing, so use other assessments to assess students' application of their growing word knowledge. These assessments can be found on page 43 and 44. A few of them are the Qualitative Spelling Checklist, McGuffey Spelling Inventory, and Vilse's Word Feature Inventory. You want to set goals and monitor growth within your groups and for specific students. When you're setting goals, consider the typical range of growth. Make sure that the goals are attainable for students and not out of reach. And you also want to consider the end of the year grade level expectation. That will help you know how frequently you need to meet with your groups and how far you need to push them to get them up with where they should be. Okay, this brings me to my questions. So as I mentioned earlier, I want you to think about what strategy your current or future students most benefit from. How will you ensure the strategy becomes a skill? And then additionally, I want you to complete the sample practice activity on page 36 for one of the students and describe how you arrived at that results. Good luck, and I look forward to hearing your discussions or reading your discussions. Thanks.